At exactly 7:12 on a Tuesday morning, I stood at the counter of my favorite coffee shop, holding a paper cup that cost just $2.89. The cashier smiled politely, tapped the screen, and then looked up with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry, sir. Your card was declined." I frowned. "That can't be right. Try it again." She did. Another beep. Declined. People waiting behind me shifted impatiently, and I could feel their eyes on me. I reached into my wallet and handed over another card. This one should work. It didn't. The cashier looked more uncomfortable than I did, but nothing could hide the embarrassment spreading across my face. It wasn't the price of the coffee that hurt. It was that familiar feeling many older people know all too well. The silent moment when strangers begin wondering if you've become forgetful, confused, or unable to take care of yourself. I forced a smile. "That's okay," I said quietly. "I'll come back another time." Leaving the coffee behind, I walked outside into the cool morning air. Cars passed as if nothing had happened, but for me, everything had just changed. I pulled out my phone and called my son, Brian. He answered almost immediately. "Morning, Dad." My credit cards were declined. For a moment, there was silence. Then he sighed. "Yeah, we canceled them." I honestly thought I'd heard him wrong. "You did what?" "We canceled your cards." My grip tightened around the phone. "Why?" His voice stayed calm, almost rehearsed. "Dad, you're 70 now. You've been forgetting little things. Melissa and I thought it was time to simplify your finances." "I haven't forgotten anything." Before he could answer, I heard my daughter-in-law in the background. She wasn't trying to keep her voice down. "I told you he'd be upset." A second later, she took the phone. "Hi, Harold," she said with a light laugh. "If you ever need money, just ask us before spending anything. It'll make life easier for everyone." Everyone. Not for me. For everyone else. I looked through my windshield at people carrying briefcases and coffee cups, heading into work without a care in the world. My entire life had shifted in less than 2 minutes. I could have argued. I could have shouted. Instead, I quietly said, "I understand." Then I ended the call. But I didn't drive home. I drove straight to my bank. My wife, Linda, and I had lived in the same Ohio town for more than 3 decades. We bought our modest brick home when interest rates were painfully high, but we believed in paying our debts, building a future, and raising our family the right way. Linda had passed away 4 years earlier, after a long fight with pancreatic cancer. Even now, some mornings I still reached across the bed before remembering she wasn't there anymore. After retiring from civil engineering, life had become simple. Tuesday coffee, the local newspaper, lunch with old coworkers now and then, visits from Brian, Melissa, and our 2 grandchildren. I believed we were a close family. Looking back, maybe I only believed we were. About 8 months earlier, Brian had offered to help modernize my finances. "Everything's online now, Dad." He set up online banking, installed apps on my phone, changed passwords, connected automatic bill payments, and updated security settings. "It'll protect you from scammers," he assured me. Melissa agreed. Older people get targeted all the time. It sounded reasonable. I trusted them. After all, he was my son. The bank manager, Susan Reynolds, had known me for years. The moment I walked through the doors, she smiled. "Good morning, Harold." "I hope so," I replied. Something in my voice made her expression change. "Is everything okay?" "I don't think it is." A few minutes later, we were sitting in her office while she reviewed my account. She stopped typing. Then she looked back at the screen. "Mr. Walker, I'm seeing several changes." "What kind of changes?" She slowly turned the monitor toward me. "The mailing address on your account was changed yesterday." It wasn't my address. It was Brian's. Before I could react, she continued. "Your primary phone number was also updated. Brian's number. And the email address now belongs to Melissa." For several seconds I couldn't speak. "When did this happen?" "Yesterday afternoon." "I wasn't here yesterday." "I know." She clicked to another page. All replacement debit and credit cards were mailed to the updated address. I stared at her. What replacement cards? The ones issued after your original cards were canceled. I felt the ground disappear beneath me. I never requested any new cards. Susan folded her hands carefully. Did you authorize these changes? No. She nodded slowly, picked up her office phone, and called someone. Could Kevin from Fraud Services join us? Fraud. That single word made my stomach tighten. 10 minutes later, Kevin arrived carrying a tablet. His questions were calm and direct. Have you lost your identification? No. Did you authorize anyone to manage your banking? My son helped me set everything up. Does he know your passwords? I suppose he does. Kevin exchanged a quiet glance with Susan, the kind professionals give each other when they've seen something like this before. He continued reviewing the account history. There are authorization forms attached to your profile. I haven't signed anything. He enlarged one document and turned the tablet toward me. There was my name, Harold Walker. It looked exactly like my signature, except I had never signed it. Not once. I looked up. Can signatures be copied? Kevin answered carefully. It's possible. Susan leaned forward. Before we jump to conclusions, we'd like to review every change made over the last several months. Several months? She nodded. These situations usually happen one small step at a time. Kevin quietly added, not all at once. As I sat there staring at the records, I finally understood something. The declined coffee wasn't the real problem. It had simply been the first visible crack in something much bigger. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure how much control I still had over my own future. That night, sleep never really came. I sat alone in my living room with the television muted, staring at a framed picture of Linda. It had been taken the summer before she got sick. She was smiling with a little streak of white paint across her nose after we'd spent the afternoon repainting the porch. She always told me, when something doesn't make sense, don't rush to fix it. Understand it first. By morning, I knew exactly what I had to do. Not confront Brian. Not yet. When I returned to the bank, Susan and Kevin were already waiting with a thick folder spread across the conference table. Kevin pointed to the earliest record. About 8 months ago, your online banking credentials were reset. That didn't surprise me. Brian had helped me set everything up around that time. The following month, Kevin continued, Brian was added as a secondary contact. I nodded slowly. 3 weeks later, transaction alerts stopped going to your phone. They went where? To Brian's. I leaned back in my chair. Every single change sounded harmless by itself. Together, they painted a very different picture. Kevin continued. 3 months later, spending limits on your accounts were reduced. I never asked for spending limits. They were lowered to $500. For a moment, I almost laughed. I had spent 40 years managing multi-million-dollar construction projects, yet someone had quietly decided I couldn't spend more than $500 of my own money without restrictions. Susan broke the silence. The good news is we haven't found evidence that your money has been stolen. Then what exactly happened? She chose her words carefully. It appears someone was slowly increasing control over your finances. That sentence stayed with me all day. Not theft. Control. Driving home, memories I had ignored suddenly began fitting together. Last Thanksgiving, Melissa had insisted on paying the restaurant bill before I even reached for my wallet. You've done enough for this family, she'd said with a warm smile. At the time, I'd thought it was kindness. Now it felt different. Around Christmas, Brian offered to organize my tax records. He also asked unusually detailed questions. How much money stayed in my checking account? Were any certificates of deposit about to mature? Had I updated my beneficiaries? Back then, I assumed he was simply helping. Now I wondered if he had been quietly taking inventory. By Thursday afternoon, I found myself sitting across from my longtime attorney, Daniel Mercer. Daniel had prepared Linda's and my wills years ago. He wasn't flashy. He didn't make dramatic speeches, but I trusted him. I explained everything from the declined credit cards to the suspicious banking changes. He listened without interrupting. Only after reviewing every document did he remove his glasses. Something isn't right. You noticed it too? He nodded. These authorization forms reference meetings that supposedly happened in my office. They never happened. I know. Silence settled between us. Finally, Daniel leaned back. For now, do nothing. I frowned. Nothing? Don't confront your son. Why? Because people who believe they've already succeeded usually stop hiding what they're doing. That made uncomfortable sense. If Brian and Melissa think you know, Daniel continued, they'll become defensive immediately. They'll delete records, change their stories, and become far more careful. Before I left, he asked an unexpected question. Has anyone mentioned assisted living? I froze. A few times. Who? Melissa. When? I thought back. After Easter dinner. At my granddaughter's birthday party. Always casually. Always with concern. Wouldn't it be nice not to worry about yard work? Imagine having meals prepared every day. You'd have so many friends your own age. I'd always smiled and changed the subject. Daniel slowly nodded. I've seen this pattern before. My stomach tightened. What pattern? Sometimes financial control comes first. And then someone begins questioning whether an older adult is capable of managing their own affairs. The words hit harder than I expected. He wasn't accusing anyone. He was warning me. Driving home, I passed one of the newer retirement communities outside town. Beautiful landscaping, walking paths, rocking chairs on wide front porches. There was nothing wrong with the place. If someone chose to live there, the important word being choose. Suddenly another memory returned. A few weeks earlier, Melissa had handed me a glossy brochure from that very community. No pressure, she'd said cheerfully. Just something to think about. I'd never even opened it. Friday morning, Daniel called again. I've been looking into a few things. What did you find? Property records aren't the issue. What is? I found evidence that Brian recently contacted a real estate agent. My heart skipped. What did he ask? He wanted to know what homes in your neighborhood were currently selling for. I gripped the phone tighter. He can't sell my house. No, Daniel answered calmly. But someone planning for the future might still want to know what it's worth. After hanging up, I sat quietly at the same kitchen table where Linda and I had balanced checkbooks, helped Brian with homework, and planned family vacations. Every scratch in that old table carried a memory. I slowly ran my hand across the wood. This wasn't really about money anymore. It wasn't even about the house. It was about something much deeper. Someone I had spent my entire life protecting had quietly begun making decisions about my future, without ever asking me. Late that afternoon, Daniel called one last time. His voice was more serious than before. I need you in my office Monday morning. What happened? I believe paperwork may already be in preparation. What kind of paperwork? The kind that questions whether you're capable of managing your own affairs. For several seconds I couldn't answer. Outside my kitchen window, the American flag Linda insisted we fly every summer, move gently in the breeze. Only then did I realize something. This was no longer a misunderstanding inside a family. It had become a race. And if I made one careless move, I could lose far more than a credit card. Monday morning, I met Daniel the moment his office opened. A yellow legal pad, 2 thick folders, and a cold cup of coffee were already waiting on his desk. He closed the door behind me. I've spent the weekend thinking about your situation, he said. So have I. He slid one folder toward me. For now, let Brian and Melissa believe nothing has changed. I frowned. You want me to pretend? I want you to observe. Daniel explained that if they believed I had discovered the truth, They would stop communicating openly. They would become careful, erase records, and protect themselves. But if they think you're still unaware, he said, they'll continue acting naturally. That's when people reveal who they really are. It wasn't revenge. It was patience. That afternoon, Brian called. "Dad, how are you doing?" "I'm doing all right. I've been meaning to stop by. How about dinner tomorrow?" "Sounds good." Then he added, "And don't worry about those credit cards. Everything's under control." I forced myself to stay calm. "Thanks for looking out for me." He laughed softly. "I knew you'd understand." After we hung up, I sat quietly in my chair. The hardest part wasn't pretending. It was realizing my own son believed my silence meant surrender. The following evening, Brian and Melissa came over carrying takeout from my favorite Italian restaurant. Melissa hugged me warmly. "You look tired." "I didn't sleep much." She exchanged a quick glance with Brian. "Did you remember to take your blood pressure medicine?" "I've taken it every morning for 12 years. She smiled. "I know, just checking." Dinner remained pleasant until dessert. Then Brian cleared his throat. "Dad, we've been thinking." I waited. Managing finances gets harder as people get older. Melissa gently placed her hand on mine. "You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. Now let us take care of you." I looked at both of them. Then I slowly nodded. "Maybe you're right." The relief on their faces lasted only a second. But it told me everything. Over the next 2 weeks, I became exactly the version of me they expected. Whenever I planned a larger purchase, I called Brian first. Not because I needed permission, because I wanted to hear his response. One afternoon, I mentioned replacing my old lawnmower. "It'll cost around $600, I said. There was a pause. "Maybe wait a little," Brian replied. "We should talk about it first." Talk about it. As though spending my own money required approval. Another day I mentioned taking a weekend fishing trip with an old coworker. Melissa immediately asked, "Do you think that's safe?" "I've been fishing for 50 years. "I know," she smiled. "But accidents happen." Every conversation sounded perfectly reasonable, until you looked at all of them together. Each one quietly reduced my independence. Daniel encouraged me to keep records. So I bought a simple spiral notebook. Every conversation went inside it. Dates, times, exact words. Whenever Brian or Melissa made a decision for me without asking, I wrote it down. Whenever they spoke about our plan for my future, I recorded that too. The bank's fraud department continued investigating. Kevin called every few days with updates. "We've found additional account changes." "Anything illegal?" "We're still determining that." "What does that mean?" "It means helping an elderly parent isn't illegal. The question is whether help slowly became unauthorized control." Again, the same phrase appeared. A pattern. Not one mistake. A pattern. One Saturday I stopped by my favorite hardware store. The owner, Frank Collins, had known me for years. We chatted about gardening until he casually asked, "So, when are you moving?" I stopped walking. "Moving? I thought Brian told you. He mentioned you'd probably sell the house before winter." I forced a smile. "Nothing has been decided." Frank looked genuinely confused. I thought everything was already settled. Driving home, my stomach felt heavier than ever. Brian wasn't simply making plans. He was talking about them as though they were already final. Without ever asking me. A few days later, my next-door neighbor, retired probate judge Walter Henderson, stopped me while I was bringing in my trash cans. "Got a minute?" We sat on my front porch. He listened carefully while I explained everything. When I finished, he remained silent for a long moment. "You think my son is trying to steal from me?" Walter slowly shook his head. "Maybe. Maybe not. Then what's happening? I've seen families convince themselves they're helping, while quietly taking away someone's voice. Those words stayed with me. Helping. Without asking. Before leaving, Walter handed me a business card. Evelyn Brooks. Who's she? One of the finest elder law attorneys I've ever known. I already have Daniel. You do, Walter smiled. But Evelyn specializes in protecting competent older adults from losing control of their own lives. That same evening, Daniel called. I think we've caught an important break. What happened? One of Brian's emails was accidentally copied to the wrong recipient. My heart started racing. What did it say? I can't discuss everything over the phone. Just tell me the important part. Daniel was quiet for a second. Then he read the subject line. Dad doesn't know yet. Those 4 words echoed through my mind long after the call ended. Dad doesn't know yet. Maybe Brian truly believed he was protecting me. Maybe Melissa honestly believed she was helping. But neither of them had noticed the line they had already crossed. They were making decisions about my future, without giving me any voice at all. By early summer, it felt as though I was living 2 different lives. In one, I was simply Harold Walker, a retired engineer who mowed his lawn every Thursday, attended church every Sunday, and loved spending time with his grandchildren. In the other, I was quietly gathering evidence against the people I loved most. Daniel reminded me of something I never forgot. You're not building a case against your son. What am I building? A record of the truth. There was an important difference. One was driven by anger, the other by facts. And facts, unlike emotions, never needed to shout. Not long after that, Daniel arranged a meeting with an attorney named Evelyn Brooks. Within minutes of speaking with her, I understood why Judge Henderson had recommended her. She asked only one important question. Has any doctor ever diagnosed you with dementia or said you're mentally incapable of managing your own affairs? No. When was your last physical? About 3 months ago. Any concerns? My doctor told me to walk more and eat fewer desserts. For the first time that morning, she smiled. From everything I've seen, you're fully capable of making your own decisions. Then her expression turned serious. The challenge isn't whether you know that, it's proving it if someone ever questions it. Over the next several weeks, Daniel, Evelyn, Susan, and Kevy, Brian sounded surprised when I mentioned my attorney would be joining us. What are we celebrating? An important family conversation. Sunday arrived. Everyone took their seats around the same dining table where Linda and I had celebrated birthdays, Christmas mornings, graduations, and anniversaries. Brian looked around the room with a puzzled smile. Dad, have you finally decided to let us handle everything? I met his eyes. Yes. Relief immediately spread across both his and Melissa's faces. They thought they had won. After everyone settled down, I thanked them sincerely. You've taught me something important. Brian smiled. What was that? I placed a thick blue binder in the center of the table. You taught me how easily concern can become control. The room fell silent. I slowly opened the binder. One change by itself doesn't seem dangerous, I said. But dozens of small changes tell a different story. I showed the online banking records, the redirected security alerts, the spending limits, the address changes, the replacement cards. Every document carried a date. Every date told part of the story. Melissa quickly interrupted. We were only trying to protect you. Susan answered calmly. Mr. Walker was never informed about many of these changes. Kevin added another document. We're also reviewing authorization forms containing signatures that appear inconsistent with Mr. Walker's previous records. Brian looked at Melissa. You told me Dad agreed. She hesitated. I told you I talked to him. You said everything had been discussed. I mentioned it. Daniel quietly spoke. Mentioning something isn't the same as receiving permission. For the first time all afternoon, Brian looked completely shaken. Evelyn leaned forward. Brian, may I ask you one question? He nodded. When did you first begin believing your father couldn't manage his own affairs? He stared at the table for several long seconds. After Mom died. He described the little things he remembered. A forgotten library book. One missed doctor's appointment. Asking for help with online banking. I kept seeing small signs. And what did those signs become? Evelyn asked. He closed his eyes. Assumptions. I quietly stood and walked into the kitchen. For a moment I looked out the window where Linda used to watch birds gather every morning. Then I returned carrying an old family photo album. I opened it to a picture of Brian as a little boy standing beside a Pinewood Derby car we had built together. You remember this? He smiled through tears. You stayed in the garage with me until midnight. I never stopped believing in you, I said softly. Then I closed the album. So when did you decide I deserved less patience than I gave you? Brian couldn't answer. Finally he stood. I'm sorry. No excuses. No arguments. Just those 2 words. I honestly thought I was protecting you. I know. I stopped seeing you as my father. His voice broke. I started seeing you as someone I needed to manage. Melissa lowered her eyes. I confused efficiency with kindness. No one argued anymore. There was nothing left to defend. After dinner, Daniel explained my new estate plan. No single family member would ever control my finances. Any future decision about my capacity would require independent medical evaluations. An independent professional would oversee my estate if necessary. Brian listened quietly. You don't trust us? I answered honestly. I don't believe anyone should have unchecked power. Not even someone they love. Then I shared one final surprise. I'd established a small charitable fund that would provide free financial and technology workshops for older adults, helping them understand online banking, fraud prevention, and estate planning. I didn't want another senior to hand away their independence simply because they were afraid of asking questions. Susan immediately offered the bank's support. Kevin volunteered fraud education. Daniel agreed to teach estate planning. Something painful had become something useful. Exactly the way Linda always believed life should work. The following months weren't easy. Trust doesn't return because someone apologizes. It returns because their actions change. Brian slowly learned to ask instead of assume. One morning he stood on my porch with a toolbox. I noticed your railing is loose. It is. I could fix it, if you'd like me to. I smiled. I'd appreciate that. Melissa later wrote me a handwritten letter admitting she'd mistaken control for protection because of experiences in her own family. She apologized without asking me to forget. That mattered. Almost a year after the coffee shop incident, Brian and I returned there together after breakfast. The same cashier smiled as I inserted my credit card. Approved. One quiet beep. Nothing more. As we turned toward the door, Brian reached into his pocket. Let me pay this time. I smiled and gently patted his shoulder. I've got it. He nodded. Not with disappointment, with respect. We walked outside together, not as a father being managed or a son trying to take control, but simply as a father and son who had finally remembered something important. Love without respect eventually becomes control, but love with respect becomes family again.